inside the drains.
And we don't have the money. It is 7 o'clock according to my digital phone.
In Lawrence right now.
We'll call this meeting to order. And because I appreciate everyone being in this new room as things are being worked on, and so sound quality in here is not what I would love it to be, but everyone just remember when you're speaking, project out. It is being recorded, and that is very sensitive, so the recording picks up all conversations, even side conversations from the audience. And so try to limit those so that the recording actually can pick up the conversation that's happening. And yeah, just remember to speak up as loudly as you can. If you can't hear one of us, just raise your hand and I'll remind everyone to speak up loudly. Awesome, thank you. So I'm calling to order the Special Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority at the Richfield Municipal Center in the Bartholomew Room, June 5th, 2023, and it's 7 p.m. We will start with our first agenda item, which is the open forum. So each speaker is to keep their comment period to 3 minutes to allow sufficient time for others. Comments are an opportunity to address the HRA. Please refer to the HRA agenda and minutes webpage for additional ways to submit comments. You can also call 612-861-9764 or email ldubois@richfieldmn.gov with questions. Can we call into the forum today as well, since we're in this room? Perfect. So you can call into the open forum today by dialing 1-415-655-0001 using webinar access code 2452-8006-454, and the password is 1234. And we already have a sign-up sheet of people in the audience, so maybe we'll start with there while we...
Is that for the public hearing or the open forum?
The open forum.
So maybe just
Is anybody want to speak for the open forum, which is not the public hearing related to the agenda item? So anything that's not on the agenda, does anyone want to speak for that? Everyone signed up is for that. Okay, perfect. Anybody calling in? Did you see?
no one was on the screen.
Okay. If somebody does, we'll stop and interrupt.
The door is locked, do you know that? I couldn't get in. Maybe somebody else might be coming in soon.
There we go, thank you. Okay, our first item on our agenda that is approval for the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any conversation or changes? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Item number 2 is a public hearing. So consider a resolution authorizing the issuance of a $10 million in multifamily housing revenue bonds for the benefit of the Upper Post Flat Housing Development and related post-insurance compliance policy. And I will turn it over to staff for their presentation first.
Thank you, Chair Freese-Daniels. The Upper Post Flats Housing Development is an extensive redevelopment and historic preservation project of 26 buildings within historic Fort Snelling. The development includes approximately 190 units ranging from studios to 5-bedroom units and will house hundreds of residents, likely adding more than 200 students to the Richfield School District once it is complete. The development project is partially complete now, with some units available and occupied today. To help manage increased costs of the project and remain eligible for low-income housing tax credits, or LIHTC, Dominium has approached the HRA to request the issuance of a $10 million in conduit bonds. The issuance of these bonds would not impact the city's ability to issue their own bank-qualified bonds and would not impact the city or HRA financially. It does, however, offer the HRA the opportunity to influence the project. HRA staff have worked with the developer on the following stipulations. At a minimum, there would be increased affordability. A minimum of 20 units would be made available to families at incomes of 40% of the area median income, AMI, for 25 years. The project would accept families participating in Richfield's Kids at Home program, and there would be a 1.5% upfront fee. In addition, if the developer is able to take advantage of the 4% floor an additional 60 to 80 units available to families at 50% of the area median income, or 20 to 35 units at 40% AMI for a period of 25 years, and a limit on rent increases to no more than 7% annually. The Upper Post Flats project is a development that already exists and is part of our community through its location within the Richfield School District. Through the issuance of conduit debt, the HRA is able to increase the affordability of the project for Richfield families, receive a fee that will help to do additional work within the borders of the city, and also formalize a relationship with the developer. This is possible without any financial risk to the HRA or any cost to Richfield taxpayers. Should the HRA approve the issuance, it should also approve the attached post-issuance compliance policy, which provides guidance on the use of proceeds of tax-exempt bonds, such as these obligations, to ensure that the interest on the tax-exempt bonds does not become taxable. Tonight, HRA attorney and bond counsel Julie Eddington is here with us, and also there are some representatives of Dominium here to answer any questions you might have of them.
Excellent. I think we'll start with the open forum and then leave time for questions that the HRA may have of staff. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for, it looks like you've numbered your list of which order you want to go in. That's very helpful. So like I said, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Please come up, state your name so we know how to address you. And then typically we don't do a back and forth. We will listen to what you have to say. We're very excited to hear from you. Take that into consideration, and then we usually have questions for staff or for the developer, and that's kind of how this will sum up. Sound good? All right, it looks like we're starting with Alex, and I have a timer on my phone. I will run this. 2 minutes.
All right. I assume I just stand here.
Oh,
Oh, I can sit. All right. Comfortable. All right. My name's Alex Osmus, 640 on Harriet Avenue. So, respected HRA and council and community members, tonight the HRA contemplates the issuance of a $10 million bond to Fort Snelling Leased Housing Associates, or de minimis apartments, for a development situated beyond Richfield city lines at the flats at Fort Snelling. While within Richfield School District, these buildings are not within the city's jurisdiction. Dominium's track record in recent news isn't commendable in my opinion, with troubling tenant relations and allegations of illegal conduct in evolving housing landscapes where landlords prioritize profits over full occupancy, routine practices involving raising rents to maximum legal limits, causing tenant distress, and sometimes, in severe cases, even homelessness. There's some excerpts from recent news locally here, such as November 2022, CARE 11 stated Dominium rips off seniors on fixed incomes. October 2022, Star Tribune writes, lives have been thrown away into disarray by a steep increase in rent. The Better Business Bureau has complaints such as on the verge of homelessness with my kids. April 2023, Anoka's newspaper states we're living in fear. And very recently, May 2023, a Star Tribune article written by the mayor of Columbia Heights stated, Dominium Properties has betrayed our city's trust. According to that same May 1st article, Dominium owns 30,000 rental units within Minnesota, resulting in an estimated $30 million in monthly revenue. Such financial prowess allowed them to enforce a maximum 12.5% rent increase, disregarding Columbia Heights City Council's concerns. Considering their considerable revenue stream, Dominium's request for Richfield's involvement in this $10 million bond seems more opportunistic than essential. Our city's reputation and values must be at the forefront of this decision, I ask. Furthermore, it's crucial to reflect on the precedent and perception this sets for future developers, and that's what's very important, is the perception and the precedent it sets. Emphasizing short-term financial gains, which by responses to previous questions, the city would realize without even supporting this bond, that's in reference to the 200 students potentially entering our school district, could unintentionally invite future developers to exploit seemingly loose fiscal practices, risking our city's integrity and long-term growth. So we need to consider how our actions today impact our future, so I ask, please voice no to this bond issuance secure the future of our community, and uphold our high moral and ethical standards. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
And I apologize, I missed that Anne had signed up first and wasn't part of the numbering system, so I'm gonna go back to Anne to make sure I don't miss her. So Anne, please come forward, thank you.
Well, I'm going to start out with my last 6 week saga. I've been helping an elderly lady that's disabled, that's needing Section 8 housing. And for 6 weeks, we looked at apartments and we thread the needle. Needle is very small to get the thread through. You have to find rent that's about $1,200 a month. You have to have the person that's renting agree to be Section 8. And I think I made 50 calls in Richfield alone. And the ones that are under that amount don't want Section 8, won't take them. I found ones that wanted it, but they were so sorry, they were filled. So she is in a Richfield apartment. She's moving to a different apartment. Richfield apartments aren't palaces. She has mice and cockroaches. She's been flooded out 2 times in 8 years, and she's moving up a floor. And she thinks that this is a good thing. We need Dominion to build something for families, because if it's so hard for a single woman to find a 1-bedroom, it must be impossible for families to find it. I was a teacher. Many of the nice families that I had that were having a hard time making it ended up in Bloomington because we did not have housing. If this bond makes it to Dominion and they build this, and we don't get the students, so be it. Our families need this, and our elderly need it, and many people need it. I think this is a very good choice to use our money on, even if those kids don't come to us. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Yeah,
Addresses, names and addresses.
they are. Yep. Okay. It looks like Mary Best.
Hey, my name is Mary Best and I live at 6727 Elliott. One of the reasons listed for providing a $10 million bond to Dominion is that it could bring an additional 200 students into the Richfield school system. Let's consider the wisdom of adding 200 more students. According to the Minnesota Department of Education, Richfield Minnesota schools, grades 6 through 8, 39% of the 920 students are proficient in reading. 21% are proficient in math. When it comes to high school, Richfield Senior High School, grades 9 through 12, is ranked, according to U.S. News, 110th in Minnesota, 84th in the metro area. Plus, only 50% are reading proficiently, and only 31 are proficient in math. Richfield school system is failing our students. Yet you want to bring an additional 200 students into this failing system without a plan to improve the education for the existing students? And every additional student comes with additional expenses: special needs, food, transportation, teachers, sports, books, and also results in increased classes. I understand there's financial benefit that comes with 200 students, but to subject them to live under Dominion is not something I would support. Also, since the flats are physically closer to Mendota Heights and Highland Park than they are to Richfield, there's no guarantee that Richfield will get those 200 students. It would really be interesting to know how many Richfield kids actually attend school here, and how many parents have chosen other school districts because Richfield doesn't meet their standards. If you have access to a $10 million bond, that money could be better invested in improving our existing school. I ask that we do not become partners with a developer that has had such a bad reputation. Rather than attention and resources to building outside of Richfield, instead, find a way to improve education for existing students. And as I read this, I have another thought. We have many thousand apartments coming in. We have no idea how many kids are being within our borders. And are we able to really fully give them a good school experience as well? We are failing our students. Thank you.
Thank you. James? Am I reading it right? Janet. Sorry, I apologize.
Hello, my name is Janet Coleman. I live at 6632 Elliott Avenue. The previous speaker highlighted some excerpts from the recent news articles and investigative TV reports, all casting the developer and property manager Dominion in a less than favorable light. On May 1st, 2023, the mayor of Columbia Heights, Amanda Marquez-Samula, published an opinion article in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune, and I would like to read some excerpts from that article. We contacted the mayor to speak tonight and share her experience with Dominion, but she has a pre-scheduled work session with her city council tonight, is unable to attend. The mayor's article was titled Rising Rent, and I quote, "Mayors across the state are dealing with an affordable housing crisis. I get daily calls and emails from low-income seniors who spend almost all their Social Security just to pay rent. I recently heard of an 84-year-old man beg for help. I will be homeless under a bridge if the rent keeps going up like this. As the mayor of Columbia Heights, I believe every community member deserves safe and dignified housing. But one of our largest renter unit managers, Dominion Properties, has betrayed our city's trust with their property, The Legends. Dominion has 30,000 units across the state, and many of the seniors are facing a 12.5 rent increase each year. What makes this so frustrating is that our small suburban city has had such high hopes for Dominion Property to help alleviate the low-income housing crisis in our community. While Dominion is allowed by law to raise rent, they're betraying the spirit of our agreement. Our Columbia Heights City Council asked Dominion to cap rent increases at 3% this year. They have refused. Dominion Property has betrayed our city trust, unquote. Tonight, HRA has the opportunity to stand against shoddy developers and parasitic rental management companies. Show that you do not support Dominion tactics. Vote no on the $10 million bond. Thank you.
We are moving on to Larry.
There's the letter.
My name is Larry Ernster. I live at 6727 Elliott Avenue South. I have only one question for HRA tonight. How will authorizing a $10 million conduit bond for a company with such a reported bad behavior benefit the city of Richfield? If you read the reports, you will see that Dominion is an equal opportunity abuser. It doesn't matter if you are young, old, disabled, or poor. As a renter, Dominion will dominate your life. Now, Dominion has some very slick advertising. Wow, their advertising is amazing. However, once there, residents find that Dominion's performance does not match their advertising. Giving Dominion $10 million says you endorse their management techniques. Giving Dominion $10 million says you are enabling their strong-arm tactics. Now, if Richfield were to generate a $10 million TIF with a developer, our $10 million would improve a portion of Richfield. or $10 million would increase our property taxes. This $10 million for Dominion does neither. Surely there must be young, old, disabled, or poor in Richfield that could benefit from an infusion of $10 million. Plus, how can Richfield give $10 million to a disreputable developer and then increase our taxes by requesting a local sales tax because Richfield can't afford to maintain its parks? So the question, how will $10 million for Dominion benefit Richfield? The mayor of Columbia Heights said, everyone deserves a nice, comfortable place to live. I agree, but Dominion doesn't and didn't provide that for Columbia Heights. Instead, Dominion's tenants live in fear, increasing poverty, fractured security, mounting stress, and the fear of homelessness. I don't want Richfield's children or our seniors to live under those conditions. As the mayor said, Dominion betrayed our trust. Don't enable Dominion's tactics. Don't endorse Dominion's management techniques. Vote no on the $10 million bond. Thank you.
Just a reminder, everyone, you want to stay quiet so the mics can pick everyone up. If there's talking or laughter or clapping while someone's talking, it kind of drowns everybody out. So I want to make sure everyone at home can hear us as well. Kathleen.
My name is Kathleen Balaban. I live at 6526 Stevens Avenue South, and I owe my officials in my city some apologies, because if I would have read this documentation from the beginning to the end, I'd be a little bit more educated. So with that said, Melissa, I owe you. And we go back to 2020 in this stuff, 2015, 2020. I mean, the DNR failed us as a city and as citizens by giving this specific developer a 99-year lease. 99-year lease. How devastating. And then we want to give them a 7% increase on their rent every single month. However, what I'm here to talk about is, I question when a public hearing is called. Who decides? I mean, shouldn't we have been involved back in 2020? On December 19, 2022, you guys made a decision to go ahead and apply for the approval for the Hennepin County to give these poor performers $10 million bond. We were not involved. You didn't ask us our opinion. There was no special session that I could find that talked about this. We were not included. We come here today, and I'll lay you 10-1, you guys are gonna approve it. Why? Because it has been going on for so damn long and nobody's talked to us about it. We're the citizens. You're supposed to be for us, by us, with us. You know, and now you're gonna take $135,000, that's the stipend that you guys didn't mention, by the way, for these low-level slumlords to come into our environment. Now, if you look at this 99-year lease, and it's located in Timbuktu, now we've got infrastructure problems. We've got busing. We've got roads that need to be built. We have grocery stores that have to come into play. This is an isolated place. So we're going to get hit with these social services in the end, no matter how you look at it. Okay? But my query is, why weren't we involved to begin with, in the beginning? You know, we don't count. You know, you put your paperwork in and you do it real fast, you know, and then, okay, all of a sudden, there's an authority notice that says there's a public hearing. What's after the fact? After the fact. You know, it's time for you guys, not only this commission, but others. And Aaron, you're gonna hear more from me because I'm gonna be talking with you about the communication, about documentation, about getting information. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to changes in the future.
Thank you for coming. Luann, am I saying that right?
Why the signs in my yard say, Richfield city officials
Can I ask you to
feed the
sit?
warranty of our tax dollars. I like to see them also. I know that you are the bosses, but
Can you please sit so we can focus and follow the plan here? I would appreciate it.
I'll
Thank
sit.
you, Rowan.
As a city council member or as a commission appointee of elected officials, you are given the responsibility of choosing how to spend public dollars. As such, what kinds of questions should you be asking on behalf of me and on the behalf of our neighbors whose money you have been given to spend? If you were to ask me, I would say I would not want one tormented, shell-shocked vet to be housed in or near an international airport. Nor would I place an infant, toddler, teen, or adult in housing which I myself could not abide. If you were to ask me if my tax dollars should be used to bankroll a multi-million-dollar corporation's purchase of sacred land, I would say definitely not. Ask questions like this: who is buying what and why? Within the boundaries of the Fort Snelling territory, the mighty Mississippi and the Minnesota rivers converge. No amount of money can pay what we the people for the benefits we derive from the existence of this blessed convergence. The plants, the birds, the wildlife all serve to sustain and replenish the air our kids breathe and the water they drink. We must protect, not exploit God's gift. Do not sell our children's water and air to big business. What next? Will big money go after the Great Lakes? We know that Dominion is not just a local group of builders with an office up the road. This corporate giant is landlord to tenants residing in 30,000 of their structures. That's not units, that's structures, which are scattered over 21 states. Is it the land or the structures placed upon that land that wealthy companies are after? Dominion boasts that each day of every year it collects no less than $493,000. In my experience with the corporate world, bigger is always better. The bottom line is referenced as religiously as concerned parents check a baby's temperature. No amount of money is ever deemed to be enough money. At least 400 acres of our life-sustaining, Amazon-like, protected, sacred, husbanded, and revered wildlife, plant, and bird sanctuary have been handed over to Dominion. It seems quite possible to me that the lands, waters, plants, valued and valued environs, now the property of corporations, could be sold for even greater profits to even wealthier conglomerates. Perhaps there are billionaires in China, in the Middle East, or in Russia who would like to own Fort Snelling. Territory now rich in life-sustaining elements must be held sacred. Christ chastised those who traded in the temple. To those of us who rely upon natural reserves for breath and water, there can be no justification for buying and selling one single acre of this precious territory. If I were the governor of Minnesota, I would ask, who gave Hennepin County the right to sell or to direct the sale of Fort Snelling acreage? Do we the people have to become lobbyists to be represented? Corporates go to taxpayers, not to banks, to borrow money. Public officials lend them our money. In deals like this, we the people lose. Those of us whose tax dollars are being used to bankroll wealthy conglomerates receive no such benefits. We must go to the
Luann?
banks and borrow money to purchase property upon which we are duly and increasingly taxed. When we are taxed without representation, we cease to be a democracy. Wealthy
Ma'am?
conglomerates receive
Your
tax
3 minutes
breaks
is up, and
long interest
could you please
loans
wrap it
at
up
our
and,
expense.
finish your
It is the
comments?
responsibility of our public officials, elected and appointed, to represent, not to exploit we the people. Private enterprise certainly has the collateral to go to any bank for a loan. Could any of our local direct builders or contractors compete? Do small businesses have the capital
Ma'am?
required to lobby legislators,
Ma'am?
as did Dominium, to create sky's the limit legislation? Each unit of so-called affordable housing is reported to cost in the neighborhood of $903,000 to construct. Upfront, we property taxpayers to Hennepin County loan corporate giants money and then gift them over and over against the tax credits and write-off, and over and over again with tax credits and write-offs. I would certainly be a wealthy woman now if I received the benefits of this kind on the backs of the poor and in the name of the underprivileged. I don't have the stomach for it. I cannot climb over the needy to enrich myself. I don't think that most of my neighbors would wittingly do so either.
Is there anybody else that hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak at the open forum? Want to do one last call for anyone in the room?
I never signed up to speak.
You can still sign up, come on. If you would like to speak, you can still come and speak
Do
and.
I have to sign up?
Just come,
I just want to ask one question.
yeah, please.
You do have to come sign in.
Yeah. Thank you, appreciate that. Perfect, wanna go sit down?
When I found out about this $10 million bond, I thought, doesn't Richfield have better places to put their money? Why do they spend it on this? I can think of a lot of things they can spend $10 million on. And one of them's right in front of my property that I have complained to the city about for years. I've lived since 1991 in my property. And what happens right in front is the storm sewer drain. And the drains underneath the city are not big enough to handle downpours. Now, we're having less of them because they're having droughts all the time. But every time we get, all this water comes down, guess what? It overflows, and it overflows in my yard and goes halfway up my yard. And I know the previous owners must have built up the yard to prevent that from going in the house. This is what I'm thinking, only I can't find evidence of that. It goes clear up to these 2 maple trees that are halfway up my front yard. So up out of there comes everything, condoms, plastic bottles, you name it. And then I have to clean up the mess. But the worst part about it is, a week later, I have a new crop of weeds. Because the people that don't take care of the weeds in their lawn, they go to seed, it rains, all the seed goes in the street, it goes down into those sewers, and then it overflows, and I get all the seeds, and I'm fighting weeds constantly in my front yard. I shouldn't have to do that. The city should come around and pull those weeds, if they're the cause of this. And I've even, last year, I reseeded that area, because after I pulled weeds, it sprayed weeds, and I put soil on it. Well, then we got, and this is before we got it, and we got this downpour, and it all went down the drain, because it all overflowed, went down the drain. So I put in for requested money for my cost of my seed and my soil, and I was told, well, the city can't do that because it's not their fault. It is their fault because they haven't replaced those drains underneath the street all these years. And the people that are in city council now don't even know it's a problem. I go, where have you guys been your whole life? Haven't the older people that used to be in city council told you about this problem? There's other areas of the city that have the same problem. And some, it even floods the basements of the houses. And I was told the money goes to those people first. I go, but you're never gonna get to people like me. And they said, well, someday when we eventually redo the streets, when they need redoing, we'll rebuild and put in bigger drains under there to take care of this storm sewer water. I go, yeah, and when is that gonna be? When hell freezes over? I don't think so. I'm not counting on it. But, and then I get a letter from, well, we just don't have any money. The city just doesn't have any money. Well, now I hear about $10 million that they're trying to give away. Well, $10 million, they could work on the streets and replace those. Now, I don't know how far that would go.
Thank you, Linda, thank you.
I don't know, but think about it. Let's just set priorities straight,
Thank you for.
okay?
Anybody else want to speak at the open forum that hasn't spoken already?
No one online.
This was my next question. No one online? Okay. I will ask for a motion then to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Is there any conversation, comments? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. Thank you everyone for coming. Anybody, we'll start maybe with questions from the HRA for, of staff or of Dominion at this time? Yes.
Got some questions mostly for staff and maybe one for Dominion. One comment I heard sort of through several of the public comments was the sort of opportunity cost of $10 million. Just to clarify, we don't have $10 million we're gonna spend on something else, right? This would only exist because they're borrowing it and repaying it, right?
Did you want to answer that? Yes. Yes. So, what we're talking about tonight is providing Dominium with a conduit bond. That means there is $0 coming from the city or the HRA to Dominium. All we're doing is we're lending, which is allowed by the IRS. The HRA is lending their ability to do tax exempt bonding for the finishing touches of the DNR's project at Fort Snelling. So we're agreeing to let them issue bonds through the HRA, which is totally legal. There is not $1 going from city or HRA to Dominium. It will take the ability to do the bonds, and they will find a buyer for their bonds, and that's how they get the money. They're getting a loan from somebody else, not the city. But they need to go through us to do tax exempt bonds, because when you do affordable housing, you have to have bonds that are tax exempt, and you also need allocation from the state. We've received the allocation, and so tonight we're asking for the approval for the bonds. Again,
Ma'am,
$0 going out of the HRA. Well, it's true.
I don't believe you.
we're not engaging. If you disrupt one more time, I will have to ask you to leave so that we can make sure that everyone hears what's happening.
I'll only disrupt after you speak.
No disruption, ma'am, please. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Leary?
So, and that was a really good big picture explanation. I do want to just to make very clear to ask sort of in the same terms that the comments were made. So if we said no to this, there is not an available $10 million or any amount of money that becomes available that we could spend on anything else. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The other questions I have, and I did ask Director Heelman this in advance, but what exactly happens during a default? And can you just explain again how it doesn't affect the HRA?
So it's extremely rare for tax exempt bonds to go into default. In fact, I've been a bond attorney for 20 years, and I've never had a default. Right? There's been IRS audits which have been resolved. If there's an IRS audit, and the city or the HRA would need to get involved, the developer has to pay for any of those costs. Those are exceedingly rare. In the 20 years I've been a bond attorney, I've done about 20 IRS audits. And so I highly doubt that there would be an IRS audit for this particular deal. I have never been involved with a defaulted bond. I think there was maybe once in our firm's history where there was a defaulted bond. But again, the developer had to pay back the lender, and it didn't have anything to do with the city that was involved. The city does not need to pay for any costs related to a default or an IRS audit or anything else that might come up. And we make that very clear in the bond documents themselves.
And then, again, just to be clear, if there were a default, although that's very unlikely, would that impact the city's credit rating, or would it make us, would it cost more for the city to borrow money in the future as a result?
Great question. When you're doing conduit bonds, there is absolutely no impact on your credit rating, either the cities or the HRAs. It does not, these bonds do not impact the city's ability to go out and issue bonds this year. You still keep your bank qualified status for up to $10 million if you wanted to do bank qualified bonds this year. So there really is no impact on the HRA or the city related to these bonds, except for what we're doing right now, the public hearing. Again, the costs of the notice and the publication and all of that is paid by the Dominium folks.
Okay. I also wanted to ask, I have actually not read it, but I'm relying on what members of the public shared about the concerns from Columbia Heights mayor about the spirit of an agreement being violated, although the terms were met. And I think this is self-explanatory, but to be clear, the benefits you've listed in terms of the minimum 20 units, acceptance of Ridgefield kids at home, that's not the spirit of the agreement. Those are literal requirements that there would be a violation if they weren't to follow that, right? Okay.
That's correct. For the audio, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have one question for the developer before I pass the torch. And my question is just, so what happens if we deny this on your end? Like, what is your plan B? What would you do to fill this gap?
Council members, or excuse me, commissioners, I forget what I meant tonight. My name is Kyrie Duckett. I'm here representing Dominium Development this evening. I'd say Plan A is Plan A and Plan B to begin with.
Speak up,
I sure can.
You can turn around if you like, they'd like to hear too.
ma'am, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. The plan is hopefully to have success, and happy to answer any questions. I can't specifically speak to the Plan B for this project today, but I can talk in general that there's a requirement, what we call the 50% test, that the bond attorneys could speak to more specifically, that half of the building cost have to be financed with tax-exempt bonds in order to be eligible for the low-income housing tax credits, the LIHTC that we mentioned. So if we don't get the bonds, or I shouldn't say specifically tonight, but generally in a project, if you don't meet that 50% test, that means that you're not eligible for the same amount of tax credits, and that affects the entire deal feasibility to begin with.
So can I follow up on that? Because I was gonna ask about that. One of the speakers talked about why you would need the $10 million. So would the affordability be impacted for the people that are already living there if you didn't get the 10 million because you wouldn't get the tax credits? Or are those people unaffected, or what's the effect of not getting that 10 million and not getting the tax credits? I was just wondering how it all ties together, and I don't know if Attorney Eddington wants to speak to that or the Dominium representative.
Mr. Nolde would like to speak as an attorney for Dominium.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners. My name is John Nolde. I'm with the law firm of Winthrop and Weinstein. And to answer your question, the current tenants, nothing would affect them in terms of the affordability. The project has already entered into restrictive agreements that provide for affordability. So that is done. Nothing can affect that except for what you're doing here, which is actually going to increase levels of affordability at the overall project. So I don't know if that answered your question. So if you don't pass this tonight, Dominium is prepared to do additional affordability over and above what they've already agreed to do as part of this project. for the issuance of the bonds tonight.
So to your question, Madam Mayor, and John's point, we've already have 26% of the apartment homes at Fort Snelling that are already leased out. And I think some smaller percentage of that is already occupied. Those folks are completely unaffected, will still be served at their current affordability levels. Action you're taking tonight means that for the 74% of the units that aren't already leased up already, that those would have deeper levels of affordability below that 60% AMI level, at a 50 or a 40% level as put into the agreement in your packet.
Mr. Nolly, can I ask in another way? So if the developer is unable to get the $10 million in bonds tonight through this issuance, would it be correct to say that you would look elsewhere to find the $10 million in bonds to make sure that you could qualify for those LIHTC credits?
Yes.
Kind of a follow-up to that question, I know one of the speakers mentioned that the project is actually closer to some other municipalities. I think Mendota Heights was mentioned. I'm just curious as why you come to Richfield. Is it because our school district is part of the geographic location, or are there other reasons?
Yes, that was absolutely part of the analysis. That wasn't my decision, but in conversations, looking at the commonalities, the fact that the school district overlapped with the boundaries, and that the students would be attending Richfield schools, thought it was an appropriate party and partner to work with to provide the additional benefit of the cash that's being coming with this project to the city and HRA of Richfield in the form of the issuer fee.
This is a good opportunity to mention that the school district is supportive of this is a good opportunity to mention that the school district is supportive of the project, and that the issuance of the bonds tonight would also bring a specific commitment to work with families that are part of a Richfield School District program as well.
Yes, go ahead.
So several of the speakers talked about maintenance concerns, and we referenced articles that were sent to us earlier about things like garage doors being broken and that kind of stuff. So since Fort Snelling is in an unorganized territory, I asked staff, and I think it should be made known, who has the ability to inspect to make sure that you're maintaining quality and that you're maintaining the quality of the units and the apartments? So I don't know if you want to go ahead with that, Executive Director Palman, or?
Yes, thank you. I'm just trying to pull up that information.
Well, I know it was written into the agreement on page, on the agenda page, I think it was 16, that we get to have inspections, but who else gets to have inspections?
Sure. Since the property is in, all inspections as it relates to building permits is through the state of Minnesota, including the temporary and final certificates of occupancy. Since they're in unincorporated Hennepin County, there's no official jurisdiction for a rental license. However, Minnesota Housing, as the allocating agency, does have both file and physical inspections of the property. Also, the DNR retains rights to inspect the property, including units. That was part of their negotiation. And the lender, Freddie Mac, and the equity investor, US Bank, also retain those rights. And then ultimately, they'll need to follow all laws and county ordinances. So I think this originally came up with in regard to a rental license. So while there isn't a rental license, there is a significant amount of overview of the units and the project.
And in our documents here, it also says we could do inspections.
Yes, that is written in that we could, specifically related to any units with our Kids at Home program, if our families were in those units, and the affordable units, yes, we would have that right as well.
And then I had a question for the developers. We frequently ask developers when they come before us if they have plans for accessibility in their projects. So do you have plans for accessibility in your projects?
I can't speak to this project specifically. I don't know the answer.
Commissioner Supple, actually, Assistant Director Julie Urban and I have toured the project. Because it's a historic preservation project, it is difficult to achieve the accessibility that you can get in a new project. But there are several units in the various buildings where ramps have been built in. There are low and no thresholds. So they have done their best within the confines of a historic preservation project.
And then, it was also brought up in one of the articles about, the management team. So, and like, do you do background checks for the management companies, or who's your management company that's gonna be, with the tenants, daily and helping them with security deposits and that kind of stuff?
Dominium Management is under the Dominium umbrella and would also be managing this development and as well the apartment homes at the Fort Snelling complex.
And there's security checks and background checks and.
Both residents and anyone that they allow into their unit, so anyone who's on the lease undergo a very rigorous process of, and our employees.
I wasn't clear.
Sorry.
The concern was that one of the management team that was like the manager was the person they were concerned about. So do your employees have background checks?
They do.
I have a couple more questions, but if somebody else wants to go.
Does anyone else, Commissioner Hanson?
Okay, a second.
I can ask a question if you're.
Okay, go ahead, Lauren.
You know, we are talking a lot about area median income and units at 40% of the area median income. And I think what we might be skipping over is what that actually means, what that means for rent, what that means for those families who reach that. Could you, I know we talk about it a lot, but since we have some folks actually here, can we talk a little bit more about maybe not specific rent requirements, because I know that's kind of catching you off guard about what those numbers are, but that translates to rent. Is that true, that translates to rent prices?
Chair Vries Daniels, are you asking whether or not, so when these units are set to be available for families at 40% of the area median income, that involves both an income qualification on the tenant side. It also involves reducing those rents to a level such that the families in the units are not paying over a certain percentage of their income. So it's both checking that the families qualify in terms of their income and also reducing the rents below market level. Was that the question?
Yep, and those rents are set by the Met Council?
HUD, Housing
HUD,
and Urban,
thank you.
Urban Development, yes.
But they are set by the HUD agency.
And then a follow-up to that, so then if the 40% and the 50% AMI, if they fluctuate and change, does that mean then the rents can follow those numbers?
Yes, they do that, yes.
My recollection is we reviewed those every couple of years when HUD changes them.
We do, and occasionally we adjust our Section 8 numbers and kids at home numbers to reflect those, yes.
Thank you.
So, with the Section 8, Ridgefield people with the Section 8 voucher could live there, but also other people in the metro area? Or is it just restricted to vouchers that are HRA is given out, or is it open to anyone with a Section 8 voucher?
Right, we looked into whether or not Richfield could actually be the administrator for this area because it's unincorporated. We found that we weren't able to, that was originally one of the things we wanted to stipulate. However, because it's unincorporated, the way the law is written, that has to be Metro HRA. There would need to be a legislative action to change that. So Section 8 voucher holders, Richfield voucher holders can move in there. Voucher holders from other areas can move in as well, but it will be administered by Metro HRA.
Thank you, that's helpful. And then my other question, it says that there are 3 things that would be stipulated, and then an additional 2 if the developer can take advantage of the 4% floor under the Internal Revenue Code. Can you explain how all that works?
Mr. Nolde may.
Yeah, so when the project was first closed upon, Federal government had initially passed legislation as part of a Budget Reconciliation Act that fixed what's called the 4% floor. There's a long history here, but with the tax credit, the low-income housing tax credits that come with tax-exempt bonds, it was a floating amount. So it's a math calculation based upon the amount of your costs multiplied by the percentage of affordability in your building. And originally, when the act was passed in 1986, they set it as at 4%. So that calculated your low-income housing tax credits. As interest rates have fallen since 1986, that number, Congress had floated that number and it went down to like 3.1%. So it reduced the amount of low-income housing tax credits available to the project. One of the items on a bipartisan basis that they negotiated in the budget reconciliation bill was to fix that at 4%. And so,
If I can, essentially the federal government does a really complicated calculation that says you're awarded $1 of tax credits. Is that dollar worth a full dollar or less than $1? For when this project initially closed 4 or 5 years ago, it was less than $1. And then Congress passed a bill within the time between then and now that said the value of that credit is actually $1. And so if we can take advantage of that, it's still an open question on whether we can take full advantage of it. That's when those commitments come into play. Is that correct? Okay.
Anybody else have any questions on the commission? Any questions? Okay. Comments? We'll hold comments until. Okay. Seeing no one else having any questions, I think. Let me make sure that all my questions were answered. Is there a motion at this time? Anybody want to make a motion?
Madam Chair, can or should we move these both together, or should they be separate items?
We should move them together.
Okay, thank you. I will make the staff recommended motion to, number 1, approve the attached resolution authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of multifamily housing revenue obligations for the benefit of Fort Snelling Leased Housing Associates 1, and authorizing the execution of the delivery of documents related thereto, and number 2, to approve the attached post-issuance compliance policy.
Is there a second?
I will second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any comments that anyone would like to make or conversation?
Well, I guess the comment I would have is that, you know, I know that there's such a dire need for affordable housing, and with units at the 40% AMI and potential of some more at 50%, this seems like a project where there's really kind of a deep affordability to it, which is rare to find. So I think because of that, I think it really sounds like quite a win. I know there were some comments during the public hearing too about the impact of the school with not guaranteed, but potentially, you know, around 200 students or so. And I know that for funding from the state, a lot of times, you know, more students mean more funding from the state. So that sounds like a win as well, I would think, as well as I think the comment from the applicant that the school district has expressed support for the project.
So I think that the thing for me is the question of like what we're deciding tonight versus general opinions about the project and about the developer. And I appreciate the research and effort that the public has gone into of looking into this developer. I exchanged even links to older articles about this project. And there's a lot to not like about this project. There's a lot of good things too. It's restoring these beautiful buildings. It isn't like an enormous subsidy per unit. It's kind of far from transit. It's kind of far from Richfield. I totally hear all of those criticisms. But we're not making the decision to approve Dominion owning this property or developing this property. That decision was made a really long time ago. If we say no to this, they don't cease to become the developer, and the issues that may be associated with them don't go away. The only thing we give up are the benefits that have been described of the fee we get, which would benefit Richfield, getting this increased affordability that, as we've heard from one of the speakers, is really desperately needed. So I just don't see any advantage to saying no. It feels like we would be sort of taking an ideological stance that would ultimately harm Richfield families, and I don't think that's worth doing. I think staff have created a good agreement, and I'm happy to support it.
Yes, go ahead.
So many concerns have been raised during the public hearing, and we've had emails from residents about Dominium, but the fact remains that you're already developing the housing with the Upper Post Flats project at Fort Snelling. What I would encourage Dominium is to carry the message back to your corporation to please deal with all the issues that have been raised and have been talked about tonight, because people do care about all of those things, and I think it's the right thing to do to address some of those issues.
Ma'am, oh, sorry.
So many of the issues would not be resolved by simply voting no. So how do we work to resolve those issues and get the best possible outcomes for the people that are living there and for our broader Twin Cities communities? That's the question I'm thinking about. How do we get the best outcomes? So I believe moving forward with the agreement, because we can have more influence and make sure that the things that are better for the people involved happen. Like, it gives us the right to do those inspections because it's written right into the contract. If we say no, then we don't have any influence over any of the inspections or any of that, because it's outside of our city limits. So I do think we do need to be vigilant. We need to exercise those inspection rights. The agreement also allows us to have deeper affordability for more units, with rent increases capped at 7% annually if Dominion qualifies for that 4% floor under the Internal Revenue Code. So both affordability and rent increases have been issues that we've struggled with across the board. Deeper affordability and larger units would be pluses for this agreement, because those are things we have struggled with for the HRA to find. In a lot of the residents' emails, there were questions about fiscal policies, and some of that came up tonight. I want to talk about that for a minute, because I don't think it's a real common thing for us to do conduit bonding, and this is a special situation that doesn't usually happen. And so I would urge that we make sure that conduit bonds are rare, and it's not something we would just be like doing it for anybody. So that's why I was asking the questions about why did we get involved with this project. I want to emphasize there is no risk to the city or our credit rating, but clearly the community does want to have more discussions about fiscal policies and debt policies. And so I'm hoping that those discussions are going to come up at the council level when we're discussing the budget and how we should be using our money. And there were comments made tonight of ways people would like the money to be used, and so we've taken note of those. And I think it's good food for thought as well for the HRA to think about how our TIF policies and those things, to make sure we should always keep reflecting and making sure it's the best possible thing. So in summary, this is not an ideal situation, but we can make it better with our involvement. So pragmatically, I think I'm gonna end up voting yes out of pragmatism. But I would challenge Dominium to step up and to be a good community member here and in the broader Twin Cities area, and carry that message back about maintenance and inspections and security and all those things to make it better for all the people that are in your project. Thank you.
I'm not gonna restate, but I think my colleagues bring up some excellent points, and I think the people who spoke at the public hearing also had some really excellent points. And what I appreciate about everyone coming out and sharing their concerns, it gives us an opportunity to dive into the details and really understand these complicated things like bonding that I think every taxpayer is not an expert in, right? And understanding what that actually means, and through this discussion being able to do that. And so I really appreciate staff and the HRA attorney in what they have put into the contract to make sure that the needs of Richfield are in the contract, right? And so ensuring that we can expand our kids at home, having that affordability is written in exact language, that it is clear of what our expectations are for Dominion and the community. And so, thank everyone for sharing their voices and as well. Any other comments? Since it's been moved and seconded and seeing no other comments, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on, you're welcome to stay, I will say. You're always welcome to come to our meetings, not just our special sessions. So please always, when they are held in the main room, we very rarely have people come speak to us, so please come. All right, moving on to item number 3, Executive Director Hillman, HRA discussion items.
I just need to get there on my agenda here.
Page 190.
Scan it through. Okay, so this is really just an opportunity for the HRA to ask questions of staff. As you likely know, a couple of weeks ago on May 23rd, the City Council denied a proposal by Best Buy to terminate the minimum assessment agreement that's in place for their corporate campus at 7601 Penn. The details of that proposal were included in your packet. We just attached the council packet with all of the information there. And again, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of staff and HRA attorney because you maybe didn't have the opportunity to do that at the council. And if some agreement were to come back, both the HRA and the City Council would need to vote on this. The City Council would officially need to release them from the minimum assessment agreement, and the HRA would need to approve an amendment to the contract. To update you on where we are, we're continuing to have discussions with Best Buy. The council indicated to us, and staff also believes that an agreement that is mutually acceptable to all parties really is in everyone's best interest. Both sides of this issue feel strongly that they are correct and there are a lot of dollars at stake. I do think it, again, would be in our best interest to find an agreement that works for everyone. And to avoid any possible litigation because there is a lot of risk associated with that. However strongly you feel about your position, you're in a courtroom and you don't know how that's going to go. So again, we're just providing this information to you and we're here to answer any questions that you might have after reviewing that.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
So you said the HRA would have to vote, the city would have to vote. Are there other jurisdictions like the school district or the county? Who else would have to weigh in on this? What's the process moving forward?
The TIF statute requires, in order to amend or get rid of a minimum assessment agreement, you need the city council, you need the school district and Hennepin County all to sign off on the termination of the minimum assessment agreement. And of course, the HRA also needs to sign any agreement that we have because it would be a mix of potentially reducing or getting rid of the minimum assessment agreement and then amending the contract that the HRA has with Best Buy.
So are there timelines to that? Like, do you have to get to the county by a certain date or time, or how does that all play out?
It needs to be executed by all parties and recorded at Hennepin County on or before June 30th.
In order to take effect for the next, right, so it would be June 30th of this year in order to affect the pay 2024 and beyond.
And that's the last year.
2025 is the last year. The TIF district will be decertified at the end of 2025. Okay,
No
we
questions.
just
Your
wanted to
packet
make sure
provided
that
a lot
you
of
had
information, so.
an opportunity if you had questions.
Okay, I gotta get back to page 1. Thank you. All right, so So, that is the end of our agenda. Do you have an update?
I was gonna ask Assistant Director, Julie Urban to give an update on some of the housing legislation, out this session.
So many things.
Yes, Chair Reese Daniels and members of the HRA. It was a busy year at the legislature, as I'm sure you've known. We sort of had given up tracking because it was impossible to keep up with all that was happening. But the end result for housing this year was an historic $1 billion was devoted to housing. A lot of that's one-time money, but it's still pretty exciting. It isn't even close to what the normal is. So some of the highlights that we're most excited about was they dedicated $200 million in cash for housing improvement bond eligible projects. So those are the bonds, HIB bonds, that some of our all affordable projects have been vying for and haven't necessarily been successful because there haven't been enough. Last year there was no bonding bill, so there were no HIBs. So we believe that's why MWF Properties was not successful. So this year there's all this money available, so our fingers are crossed for our two projects that are going forward for money as Beacon as well as MWF Properties. They increased the money for a new program called the Local Housing Trust Fund Grants. So that money is now up to $5.8 million, and we're waiting for rules to come out, and they're close to, I think, actually getting those rules out. We believe we'll be eligible to apply for some money for our trust fund through that program. They awarded $90 million for NOAA preservation. I don't know anything more about that than that much. They also approved a 0.25% metro sales tax that's going to be specifically for housing. The city is likely to receive housing aid through that program, as well as there's money dedicated to a rent assistance program, so a state-funded rent assistance program. So we also believe that our housing authority will receive funding for vouchers, potentially project-based vouchers through that money. So a couple of avenues, and waiting for the league is gonna share sort of what's that estimate of that direct amount that we would be eligible for. It's gonna be based on population as well as the number of cost burden households in the community. They also approved some money for down payment assistance, including $50 million specifically for a first-generation homebuyer program, which is targeted at what our program is trying to target at, which are those folks who've been kept out of the homeownership market historically. So what that means for our program at this point is way too soon to know. Again, so many programs, it's gonna be a while before they have the staff and the capacity to get the rules out there and tell us exactly how it's gonna be spent. But first indications are we're just really excited at amazing investment. And our own Representative Howard, has been really one of the driving forces behind. So more to come. I just thought it was fun to share, celebrate.
I was gonna recognize that former HRA member and our current Richfield representative.
Yes.
Howard chaired that committee in the House, and now that they are not in session, maybe it'd be great to have him come give us an update in person at the HRA. So
I'll certainly invite him. Yes, he might respond to our
now they
calls and emails now. Yeah, he's been a little busy.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, you had some questions?
I just had a question, but I also want to echo the gratitude to Representative Howard. Yes. It was a big step forward for housing. You mentioned project-based vouchers, and I know one of the groups that is looking at housing in Richfield was asking us about project-based vouchers, and we didn't have those because we had a waiting list of people that were already in line. And so can you talk about the difference between the two kinds of vouchers?
Yep, and this is so preliminary, we don't know what the rules will be.
Sure.
We think we're gonna be able to create our own program and make our own decisions, but we don't know yet. But in theory, we might be able to take some of our vouchers and attach them to a specific unit, and then it stays with the unit rather than follows the person who may or move to the upper post or may move to some other community instead. It stays here in the community. So there's pros and minuses to both kinds of assistance, but in the case of these all affordable developments, having that subsidy attached is just really the gold standard for providing that deeper affordability that we struggle for. So getting at that 30% area median income, really you need that subsidy attached to the unit to be able to do that and to make the project cash flow and it's a lot of money to get down to that rent level with
today's costs.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed.
So who makes the decisions then about the process for awarding the money? Is that more work of the legislature or some other body?
So the length of the legislation for the state rent assistance program is about this long. So there aren't a lot of details, and so it's gonna fall on Minnesota Housing to express those details. Minnesota NARO and other organizations, today I was in a session with the League of Minnesota Cities and Metro Cities, and they work really hard to have relationships with Minnesota Housing and other state agencies so that we can have some influence on and, you know, help them to understand things. We really, I think at this point, our preference would be, let's run it like our federal Section 8 program, even though it's not a perfect program by any means, but that's what we have software for. That's what we have an infrastructure set up for. Can we operate that same way? But, so those are just still a lot of questions out there, but the potential is, I'm gonna be excited about it right now.
Thank you. Anything else regarding this? All right, seeing nothing else on our agenda, I will call adjournment. Thank you, everyone.
I've learned some stuff today.
You.
I had my device because I could never get the password
Yours
to
was-
work. Did you?